This is for my AP US class. As you know, the AP US exam is going to be 45 minutes, and you're probably going to be able to take it on home on some kind of device. Specifics are going to come out on April 3rd, and I'll get that to you. But just to prepare for that, I like to just review what's likely to be on the test. I think what's likely to be is the beginning, that is the Spanish, French, and English colonization of the Americas, and it's going to go to the Gilded Age period, so about 1900. 1900 will probably be the end of the testing area. So I'm going to start with a little brief review of the early period. That is the early colonization period. The Spanish colonization, as you know, developed along different lines than the English colonization of the Americas. The Spanish colonization was broader. It ended up successfully extracting a great deal of precious metals, and it led to the growth of a Spanish empire. A lot of these, the extraction processes in the Spanish colonial world established a much larger and much more important colonial structure to the metropolis, that is to Spain, than would be the case in the English colonies. So that the Spanish crown did not allow for any self-government, wanted to make sure that all these resources were getting back to Spain, so no self-rule, no autonomy was allowed. It was very strictly controlled. It had a much larger population. It was a much more mixed and diverse population than in the English colonies. Part of it is due to the Catholic ethos, that is, Catholicism did not have an elect of God as many of the Protestant sects that arrived in the Americas, particularly in the English colonies, did. So it was much more diverse, larger population, much more wealthy, and therefore less able to govern itself because of the tight controls that Spain established over its colonies in order to guarantee the flow of all this wealth back to Spain. The French colonial experience is similar to the Spanish, except that the extraction of metals and of gold, silver, as the Spanish were able to do, was not as great, was not as significant, and therefore cultivation of sugar in the Caribbean became a focus point for the French. In North America, it relied on the extraction of other resources, primarily furs and pelts, from the central part of the Americas, North America. The English colonies, on the other hand, reflected a couple of things. They reflected religious diversity, that is, they were very, very diverse. They did not share a kind of religious homogeneity as did the Spanish and French Catholic religion. And as such, they were very, very different colonies. The New England colonies were dominated by Calvinists, Presbyterians, Congregationalists, with the idea of the elect of God. You remember Max Weber arguing that this concept developed by John Calvin of predestination and God and the signs of being part of the elect as being wealth and health and power became very, very influential in the development of American exceptionalism. As Max Weber in his book, The Protestant Ethic, The Spirit of Capitalism, The Protestant Ethic, argues that Calvinism, because of his argument that predestination had taken place and that God signaled his choice by giving the elect wealth, health, power, became a underlying current in the idea of American exceptionalism and later manifest destiny. The colonies, though, were poor. The colonies did not find any gold or silver, although they came looking for those, particularly the Chesapeake colonies of Virginia and Maryland. Maryland was established by a Catholic grant from Charles II to the Earl of George Calvert, the Earl of Baltimore. But the other, certainly Jamestown, which was the first permanent English colony in the Americas, they were initially looking for to be able to extract gold or silver, as the Spanish did. When they did not find that, they were looking for a northwest passage to Asia. They didn't find that either. They settled to a kind of subsistence agriculture, which was later added on to and actually saved by the cultivation of tobacco, but it wasn't a major cash producing crop, and therefore these colonies were rather poor. Because they were so poor, because the English colonies were generally poor, and because they were religiously diverse, a lot of religious nonconformists were chose to establish colonies in the Americas in order to fulfill their own religious views and leanings. And part of that was often in opposition to the royal authority in England. And therefore, the British kings, or the English kings, they wouldn't be Britain until the 1700s, the English kings actually allowed these colonies, because they were so poor and rather unimportant and troublesome at times, to govern themselves. This is salutary neglect. The term that is used for the ability of these colonies to govern themselves under charters or under some type of private authority was known as salutary neglect. And it did lead to a practice of American local rule that would play a major role later on when that was changed by the British Crown as a result of its mercantilist wars of the 1700s, and would greatly influence the development of independence as a political ideology in many sectors of American society. So salutary neglect was another important factor, along with this idea of American exceptionalism. As I said, the colonies were very, very different, but I like to leave it there for the time being. Please view this video and also review the sections in the book in the early colonial period. Bye.